Good, beautiful morning. It's actually quite a nice morning. So guys, it is the 29th of December, I believe. 28th December, rather. And there's a funny... I think there's a funny thing happening with this now, where there's only, like I think I was mentioning in a video, there's only so many times that I can talk about net worth. There's only so many times I can update you guys on the fact that the net worth has increased by another grand this month or something like that. I mean, those will be the regular updates, but yeah, they can only happen sort of once a month, every time I get paid, or every time something significant happens. So I thought that what I would potentially do is share my thoughts on a couple of things that I've been thinking about recently. There might be things that have happened to me this year, or there might be things that I have learned from this year. And one of my all-time favorite books is The Millionaire Next Door. I probably heard that book. I listen to a lot of audiobooks just when I'm driving. But I probably heard that book for the first time a year ago, I think. And The Millionaire Next Door is a brilliant, it's a very brilliant character study of American millionaires in the sort of 80s and 90s. I think it's in the 80s. There is a second book, though, called The Millionaire Mind, which goes into a little bit more detail about, I think I mentioned this in a video that I put up recently, but they basically went into a little bit more detail on households with high investment income, which was basically their way to find out who was a prodigious accumulator of wealth, i.e. they've got high net worth compared to their income, I suppose. And then other people, rather than these people simply being high income, living high, all sorts of toys that depreciate, and they're rich, but they're not wealthy. Now, the second book goes into a little bit more detail on these, and what you'll get out of the first one is that basically millionaires tend to be people who own their own businesses and are very frugal and don't live high. They live in fairly nice neighborhoods, but not crazy high spec, ridiculous middle of New York kind of neighborhoods. They live in quite, upper middle class, and that tends to be the lifestyle of them. They have an upper middle class home, they have upper middle class hobbies, they maybe drive an upper middle class car, even then, sometimes not even that. So they do well for themselves, but you would maybe not know that they were middle class or not, or whether they're extremely wealthy, and that is the kicker of the book, that you usually can't tell. In The Millionaire Mind, it goes a step further, talks about them a little bit more depth. It's a little bit more narrative, which I quite like, and there's a couple of other things. One or two extra little bonuses that you find out are that, the sorts of houses that millionaires live in. They basically, one heuristic is that they basically don't buy a house unless they basically buy a house, and the mortgage that they take, so everything that's not their deposit, has to be about twice of what the total household income is for 2 years. So if you need to take, if your total household income is 50 grand, the maximum amount of money you should borrow is 100 grand for your house. Just a heuristic that they use, which I thought was quite interesting. There are some other things that are interesting though as well, which is that the millionaire household tends to be a traditional one, tends to be typically a man working and providing, with a woman being a traditional homemaker, and that isn't just nice to come home to. That provides what they describe as economies of scale, i.e. you don't have to manage your own home and manage so many things when you've got basically a really good team player who's playing great defence for you. So I like that. Something that they also touch on is the fact that with the same group, with the same millionaires, their houses are nice. Their house value is nice. They appreciate. They go up in value. So that works, in favour of their net worth. And something that goes with that is apparently millionaires quite like antiques, which I initially thought was quite interesting. But what they essentially will do is they buy a chair, they buy a table, something like that. And it simply means that even the very stuff that they sit on or dine off of is still something that's appreciating in value or holding its value, or maybe in some cases going down by very little. And that did make me think about something that was at the back of my mind a little bit just towards the end of this year, which was that I sold 100 ounces of physical silver that I had, literally weeks before that we've had this massive spike. Very annoying, but there we go. So I sold that, and listening to this book, I think that one of the easiest heuristics that I could take away from it, and it's the main point of this video, but one of the easiest heuristics that everybody could probably take away and put into their own life and almost definitely become rich, but slowly, this is get rich slow, is when you buy something, make sure it's durable, make sure that it can be repaired or reupholstered or whatever, and make sure it's expensive, and make sure it's rare. Actually, all those except the first one, maybe you don't need to make sure it's expensive, because there are quite a few things like that are actually rather cheap. So the example that I brought from the book there was the idea of a dining table and seats. These people, they buy nice antique furniture and take good care of them. Something else that was mentioned is that they often reupholster them, they will refinish chairs, they will do that kind of thing, which I find very, very nice, and that really does speak to something that I like, which is people having a relationship with their everyday objects, with their stuff. I don't like the idea of people just buying crap and having to trade it out once a year, every 3 years, even every 5 years seems a little bit strong for some things. And I'm a big proponent of your right to repair, and I very much like to patronise businesses that also provide things like lifetime warranties on their shit. I'll take one moment here to shout out Darn Tough, which is a company that makes socks. They have lifetime warranty on their socks, which I think is fucking cracking. Now, there are so many things where, like, now if I look back on them in my life, and this is not like a regretful, if I had just, you live like that, you're always going to stack the bad things or the things that you might have missed out on. You're never going to look around and appreciate all the good things. Sometimes they're not objects. Many times they are, I'd say often they are, but sometimes they're not objects. Sometimes a really good investment is a great spouse, and that's what I was touching on earlier. You have a great team player in your home if you have a great spouse, and I think that you need to balance each other out as well. This person that you might not necessarily need to put an awful lot of money into, but you certainly should be putting in time and care and love, is a great investment. And I'm certainly not trying to cheapen love by saying it's a good investment, but that's just simply one of the amazing ways that it pays you back. That's maybe a better way of putting it. and I recommend anybody who's out there that you ought to look at that kind of thing when everybody else is sort of telling you to do the opposite. A lot of people seem to be giving their kids this advice of, when you're sort of 16, just get out there, have fun, spread your wild oats. This is a bit boomer, but just get out there and just have fun, like go wild. And a lot of people take on that advice and they actually do it. I think that it's always worth remembering that you need to contrast that with simply what today's world is like. Maybe that's advice that a lot of boomers took themselves, but they've ended up with the kind of crash mat and with the kind of safety net that a lot of people begrudge them for. On the other hand, if you're watching this video and you're younger than 20, I'm not being facetious, and it may sound drastic, but you absolutely need to do it. If you're about 20, you need to be looking around for a wife or a husband. And you need to be looking around for a wife or a husband that you know long term is good for you. There are some quite funny videos by Sam Hyde where he's talking about an ancient Chinese bit of wisdom, which goes something like, an ugly wife is a treasure in the home. That is quite funny. I don't think that you automatically need to assume that your partner is going to be ugly, and I certainly don't think that of my wife. What you should maybe think about, though, is not ugliness, but something that really impressed me about my wife is on one of our first dates that she had a homemade, she'd done it herself, dress. And if you're watching this video and you go out on a date, just ask yourself before you go, and whilst you're watching this, what sort of things are you looking out for? Something that I was really impressed by was the fact that my wife had homemade clothes, which I love. And she's not poor, by the way, far from it. But she had that ability, which I really liked. I'm a big fan of self-sufficiency and self-reliance. So when you go out on a date, I think that you ought to look not for looks, because they go over time. No matter who you are, they'll go before you're 30. Maybe don't look for looks. Look for remember the sort of life that you want to have in the future, and the sort of parent that you want to be. And look for someone that balances that out. So someone who is a good fit for that lifestyle, that you can bring along for your vision, and they'll be happy to go along with it. And by the way, when I say happy to go along with it, women really don't care about what you earn, guys. They kind of don't. Any that do aren't worth it. And I think that there are potentially even some career women out there as well who they're looking around for guys and these women have very high incomes, and they don't realise that too much of a high income in like a office sort of fake job setting especially is quite unattractive for men. They don't like it. Usually men want to be the provider. They want to be the person that is making the most money. So if you are a woman watching this, just keep that in mind. A high income might not be working in your favour. Going back to the guys, because I think that it's mostly guys that are going to be watching this channel. Of course, just refocus on your vision for the future, the sort of life that you want to live. One of the videos that I've put up recently is just called Stardew Valley, an AK and a Land Cruiser. That is kind of my perfect society, in not as many words. And that's the sort of place that I would like to live. I'm quite a security-focused person. I'm quite steadfast in my beliefs as well, I would say. I like community, I do like homogeneity, and I think that I'm balanced out by not just the fact that I've got a wife who is competent enough to hand make her own clothes, but I also have a wife who is quite out there and has a very good, like, go get 'em. I'm security focused, she's quite focused on just trying things, and that reflects our personalities, and I think that is also really useful. So look out for traits that impress you, decide the sort of life that you want to live, and look out for traits that mix with that. Also know what you can work with, and also know what's going to piss you off. What would certainly piss me off is, I don't mind a little bit of entertainment, but I certainly wouldn't like to, marry someone who just wants to sit at home and watch their shows. That is dreadful in my mind. And it's just not conducive to children. It's not conducive. It's like looking after a child already. So think about who your perfect partner could be, who's going to help you on the mission that you have, and decide what your mission is as well, and make sure that it's something that you stick to. That's the main thrust of this part of the video. The next bit, and I touched on this earlier, is a heuristic for getting rich slowly is not just marrying well and choosing someone very intentionally. The best heuristic that I think you could probably think of for maintaining wealth long term and building wealth long term is make sure that it's rare, make sure that it's durable, make sure it's repairable, buy it and keep it forever. Okay? Buy it and keep it forever. If it's a sofa, if it's a table, I don't want people to go out now and start just buying brand name Givenchy's and stuff like that. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about things that you could buy and run forever. Potentially a good example of this that the boat has now sailed on are certain cars. So there are certain cars that I used the example of silver earlier. I wouldn't say that the boat has sailed on silver, but just buy it, hold on to it forever, and there you go. Every so often you get a nice big bonus. But that's not the point. The whole point is that you're holding on to it, literally with a view to passing it on to your kids. Like, that's the sort of time frame you need to be thinking of. So silver, I suppose, is not really something you need to repair. But if it's an item like a sofa, if it's an item that's a bit of clothing, if it's shoes and you need to resole them, that sort of thing, then yeah, make sure that it's good quality, make sure that it's rare, and just keep it going for as long as you possibly can. Keep it going forever. Another example of something that might be, the boat has probably sailed on now, but would have been a good buy it, keep it for as long as you can, is certain cars. Porsche 944. I had a friend that bought one of those for about £1,000. Good luck finding a broken one that's completely rotted out for £1,000 now. He said he sold it, and I think like a couple of weeks later, it like tripled or quadrupled in value, and now that's just where they are at. Which sometimes you just get that. Same thing with the silver for me, I suppose. I would also just say the Mercedes W124 300 diesel engines, turbo diesels as well. Again, high quality, can run forever as long as you keep on top of it. High quality, you can run it forever. That will last forever. There's a couple of videos that people like to put out there of old car adverts and magazines with car adverts in them, and it shows the prices that some of these things were going for X amount of years ago. If you were thinking of, most people run like a 2-car household, if you were thinking of like one of those sorts of cars. You could have potentially got it and just held onto it like an investment again. So make sure, guys, that it's expensive. Make sure that it's rare. Make sure that you can maintain it and that it's basically something that you could pass on to your children or grandchildren. And the things that fall into this category are replete. So again, furniture, high quality furniture that needs upholstered, high quality clothes that might need upholstered. I mean, we've really lost this idea of an heirloom. You ought to buy everything with a view to making it an heirloom. You really ought to do that. Why can't your car that you like to drive, or your project car or something like that, be an heirloom? Just been passed by a Subaru Forester. I'd quite like one of those as a little bit of an heirloom. Maybe not. But a Porsche 944 would have been a fantastic heirloom. Or a Mercedes 124 would have been a fantastic heirloom. What else would be a good heirloom? Silverware. Coin collections, when the money was real and not, just a commemorative thing. Furniture, that's a big one. Dining tables that are real oak. They're heavy, they're well made. Here's a weird one. Mantelpieces, maybe bookshelves, desks especially. All these things. Outdoor furniture, there you go. Stone benches and things like that. It's heavy, it's difficult to move around. Most people aren't looking to deal with the prospect of lugging that sort of thing around. If you do, it can pay you back in spades. It really, really can, because you're able to buy something and then never worry about it again. For something like garden furniture, that's obvious, but when it comes to cars or something like that, if you're potentially looking at buying a car that you could run forever, something that I've been thinking about recently are Honda CR-Vs with a 2-litre petrol, all-wheel drive. There would be a good buy. What about you guys buying yourselves, a nice, clean Subaru Forester, something like that you run for a while? Toyota Camrys and things like that. Just these things that, they're just... Oh, maybe in America a Toyota Camry is not rare, but all these sorts of things, you just buy them, you run them for as long as you like, and then they go up in value. I mean, that's like, sometimes you can't really predict what they're going to be, but right now, some of those things I think you would be able to look at and safely say, yeah, I think an old Volvo V70 or an XC70 is probably going to go up in value. So buy things with intention, not for attention. Buy things with real intention. Maintain them, run them forever, and they are like investments, which is so weird, but, cars would be the tricky one to time this with, but furniture is an easy one. I bet there's an estate sale or an auction near you where you can pick up some nice quality furniture for not a lot. If you get anything handed down from your grandparents, never ever sell it. That's to be handed on to your children as well. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Take care.